Welcome to Leader You by Black River Performance Management, where we believe work should fuel the human spirit, not drain it. In this leadership podcast, we will dive into the lived experiences of people flourishing in today's workplace and beyond. Join us to hear real-life examples of experiences from our own lives and from the leaders we know and trust. Thank you for listening to the Leader You podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing a dear friend of mine, Mr. Jeff Hough. I am going to tee this up in a way that I kind of talk about a little bit about what we're going to talk about in the podcast. But really, what we're going to do is we're going to share our personal stories in the podcast. And Jeff is a friend of mine that I've had for a few years, and we have been alongside each other on our leadership journey for these past couple years. And we've been sharing our wins and our losses. We've been sharing our self-limiting beliefs. We've grown tremendously by going through this whole process of discovery. And we've been vulnerable in our sharing and our openness and willingness to work on ourselves as a whole person, and not just the surface level stuff. So it is really a challenging process when you have to look in the mirror and realize that you might need to be the one to change. And that once you change, then everything else can change for the better. So that's the process that Jeff and I have been going down, is learning where it is that we need to change. And some of the lessons that come up in the podcasts that we do, we have 2 podcasts, but 2 of them, I really think that one of the messages that sticks out to me is how the joy is in the journey and it's not in the destination. And because there's always another mountain in front of us that we need to climb. And our culture has us chasing the wrong kinds of happiness. And you really can't pin your happiness on a moment or time or a significant event. Because if you do, you'll just continue to chase and chase and chase. And that is unfulfilling and unsustainable. So it's really slowing down and recognizing and being present in the moment and being all that you can be in the moments that you have. And it really is scary to acknowledge that maybe it's you that need to change. And many people don't want to hear that. Not a lot of people do. It's much easier to blame other people and to complain than it is to get to work on yourself. So in the podcast, Jeff and I really discuss how important it is for you to open your mind to this and to discover where you are limiting yourself and where you need to heal. And once you can do that, then a whole new world will open up to you, and that is rich and full of possibilities and opportunities that you would maybe have never seen before. And listen, we aren't asking you to do anything that we haven't done ourselves. It's very challenging work, and it's courageous work to actually face yourself and get sick of your own self-limiting beliefs and your own excuses and your own justifications. It's really hard to hold that mirror up and to do that. But I will tell you, once you do it, you won't regret it. So I'm hoping that what you will do is listen to these 2 podcasts and take some notes. And maybe listen to them a couple of times, because there is so much richness and depth in these, for us sharing our openness and vulnerability of what we've had to overcome. And when you're doing that, remember that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And maybe you aren't the student. Maybe it's someone you know who's struggling in life right now. Who do you know that could benefit from this podcast? Can you do something meaningful, like share the podcast with them and ask them if they'd be open, or tell them that you thought about them when you heard this because you know they're struggling? Can you do something meaningful like that and share the podcast with them and tell them that you thought of them and that you believe in them? Maybe they need someone to believe in them until they can believe in themselves. So I'm going to ask you to be that person for someone else and to be that person for yourself. And I hope that you really get out of these 2 podcasts that are going to be back to back, that really talk about leading from the inside out and learning how to deal with your whole self as a person, not just the surface things that we in society are looking at that are all externally based. We're talking about diving under the surface of the iceberg, all the stuff that you can't see. All the stuff that you can see, let's call that the external stuff, and everything under the water, that is the depth and the soul and the person that we're dealing with, that all of us have our own baggage that we need to really tap into. So I hope these 2 podcasts are really helpful for you, and that some of you are willing to do some of that work and face yourself. And hopefully, our vulnerability in sharing the work that we've had to do, even as leaders ourselves, people have been on the planet over 50 years. We don't have it all figured out. In fact, that's part of the joy in the journey, is knowing that we're learning and growing every day. And the person you are today can be completely different 1 year from now if you start to do this work. So remember, I can't want this more than you do. And I'm hoping that you can share this podcast and that this will be an impact to you or someone that you love. So thank you again for listening, and I hope you enjoy it. I'd love to hear your feedback. I'm excited to have you here, Jeff, to see where we've come and what we've learned in almost 2 years. I'm like 62 podcasts, so I'm at least 60 podcasts ahead of that one.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. But I am so excited because I'm an OG. I am an OG. I'm number 2. That's almost like as cool as being number 2 at Facebook. I'm number 2 with the Leader You podcast.
That's right. It's first loser.
Hey, if you're not first, you're last, right?
That's right. This is why we like hanging out and just making some jokes, right?
Yep.
So on our last podcast, we talked a lot about being the joy being in the journey and actually learning to build resilience and to explore how you enjoy the process versus just arriving, being on the top of that mountain. And you could relate that to work or to bodybuilding or to life, right?
Man, that I was just thinking back as we've been talking before we started, just reflecting on the last 2 years and where I'm at today versus then and where you're at.
Hmm.
And the journey has been incredible, and I've learned so much along the way, and it truly is, the joy is in the journey. It's not in the destination, because you throw out bodybuilding, what I have learned is there's always another mountain. And so you have to love the journey because the mountain is always moving.
Isn't it so true? Think about it as it relates to kids too. As soon as they're to this point, it'll be better. As soon as it's to this point, you're like, or your job, as soon as I get this position, or as soon as I get to this mountain, it'll be better. Like that doesn't exist.
It doesn't, because you're chasing the wrong happiness is what it is. And I remember hearing a podcast once where a gentleman was talking to an NBA player, and he said, well, if I'm just on this other team, I'll be happy. And he got traded to this other team, and podcaster interviewed him after that and said, are you happy? And he said, no, I still got this problem. I still got this problem. And so you cannot chase happiness externally. It has to be internal, and you have to be present in the moment. Otherwise you never will be happy.
Hmm. It's inside out, working from the inside out.
It is.
And that outside in is what culture brings us, like the position, the title, the promotion, that job, that position, whatever it is, we think when we arrive that will be the pinnacle.
If we think that we will be satisfied by an external stimulus, we're wrong.
Absolutely.
I mean, it'll last for a little bit. It's
Yeah.
like, hey, I made it. I did that. That's fantastic. But then you got to get up the next day and go to work or do whatever, and life just continues. And so you cannot pin your happiness on a moment in time or on an event.
Yep. No external circumstances. One of the books that helped me really reel that in my mind about getting control of my inner self was A Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl.
Yes. Yes. I read that one probably 3 or 4 months ago. I put it off as long as I could because I knew it was going to be a deep book.
Mm-hmm.
And when I read it, it was like, yes, this speaks to me, because it's not the people that survived the concentration camps weren't the ones that were, well, we're going to be out by Easter. We're going to be out by Christmas, because In Ted Lasso, it's the hope that kills you, right? Same thing with Viktor Frankl. It's the hope that kills you. So be present in the moment, make the best moment that you can, and go from there. So be all you can be in that moment, which is harder than it sounds, but that's where true happiness. And I like to say I'm selling peace, but that's where peace is found, is in that moment.
Absolutely. For me, peace and freedom is my new success script.
Yep.
And I didn't know that 2 years ago when we did this.
No.
I was still chasing the external success and the ego a little bit more than the soul.
Yeah. No. If you're chasing ego, you're chasing a tail that's never going to get caught. That's like watching my dog chase her tail. She just goes around and around.
So what have been the biggest lessons that you've picked up in this last 2 years? Well, first of all, you have how much more time as county commissioner?
I'm halfway through my 4-year term, so I've got about 2 years, 18 months before I have to really start working on running again.
So we've been probably friends now 3-4 years.
4 years.
4 years. 4 years. And 2 years ago is when we started like down the path of coaching, and our friendship developed, and then we did a coaching mastermind, and we started going deeper in our leadership, in our authentic selves, kind of getting to the space of, but what's really behind that, Jeff? What's really behind that, Angie? Like, not the surface level crap.
Yeah. Well, you talk about going through that coaching mastermind class, which was fantastic and was a life changer. But the thing that I've pondered the most since that point in time, because there was a big shift, but how do you live on the other side of change? And we've talked about that a little bit, that once the earth has shifted, your perspective has shifted, how do you go forward? Because things are not the same. And I've worked with a client, and it cracks me up because I talk about this all the time. We got them through one or two of those big shifts. And I went and talked to them one day, and they said, "Damn it, Huff, everything has changed, but everything's the same. How do I deal with that?" And that's what the journey of the last 2 years has been, is learning to live on the other side of that change. And for me, I think the big takeaway came last year when I was prepping for my first bodybuilding show. I was in hour number 2 of standing on a stupid treadmill on a Sunday morning, hating everything. And I thought to myself, no, I'm going to love the process. I'm going to make every step the very best step I can. I'm just going to get into that. And after about 30 seconds of that, this is crap. This is stupid. But then as I sat and pondered a little bit longer about, okay, I have to love the process. What does that mean? Then the thought hits me, you don't love the process. You succumb to the process, or you surrender to the process. And once you surrender to the process, that's when things changed. And that was a whole mindset shift for me. That moment of, I have to surrender to the process. So that's where I'm at, is trying to find that process that helps me move through from one level to the next.
Surrendering to the process, surrendering to life as it is and not how you want it to be.
Correct.
So can you give me another example in your life, not just in bodybuilding, but in life, of where you've really learned to use that skill of learning how to surrender?
Well, as a commissioner, in a lot of different issues, this last year we worked on a huge project that was big. It was a big undertaking. I spent a lot of time on this project, and a lot of people thought that it meant the world to me, which it did, but it didn't. I wasn't pinning my being to the outcome of this project. And we got to a point where the project died, and I went, okay, it's dead. What do we do next? And we walked away and went to something else. And pretty soon the next phase of that project popped up and came back to life. And we went, okay, let's take the next step. And every time that project would die, when it would come back, it would get a little bit better and a little bit better. And we went through 4 or 5 iterations of that. And we reached a point where it died for what appeared to be the very last time. And my team that had been around me and helped were fantastic. They were all sad and downtrodden, which they should have been, because they invested a lot. But I was very much at peace with that, because I didn't tie my value and my worth to the outcome of that project. It was, okay, there must be something bigger at work here. So I'm going to move on. And so I started to move on, and life was good. But true to form, 2 months later, something has now come along again, and the project is coming back to life again in a completely different form than what we talked about before. And it's like, okay, I'll see where this goes. But that's a good example of finding that peace in the journey and not tying myself to an outcome or to a mountaintop, but more, what's the process? Staying with it.
It's such a good mindset. And it's easier. It sounds simple. It sounds easy or,
No.
simple, but it's not easy, right?
Yeah.
Like it's a practice. So how do you catch yourself, aside from calling me and saying, can you walk me off the top of this cliff? Because we do that.
You do.
Because we call each other sometimes and say, I'm hijacked and I'm going to freak out on somebody, or this is how help reel me in. But what are some of the other strategies besides phoning a friend that you do to check where are you, what do you need, and remove your ego and pull yourself back from the outcome, the attachment to the outcome?
That has taken a lot of work to get there, and it is an everyday process to get there. But the very first question that I ask myself is, what does it matter? What does it matter if this works or if it doesn't? And the other big thing that I say all the time is nothing has meaning until you assign it a meaning.
I've heard that before.
Yeah. I've used it on you. So, but once you start to realize that events in your life are nothing more than just an event, and you control how you view that event, once you can get to that point where you understand that and then put that into practice, it's a game changer, because then all of a sudden you begin to take emotion out of decision making. You take this emotion out of relationships, and it becomes, you can see things as they more truly are. So that's the big thing, is nothing has meaning until you give it meaning or until you assign it meaning. What's the value of this, or what is this? And then my wife came up with this, so I give her credit to this. And we're a spiritual family, but she says, if you really have faith in God, does the outcome of anything really matter? And that hit me hard when she said that. And I thought, that is so true. If I really believe that God is there and he loves me and wants the best for me, then I will take what he gives me and I will move forward. And so it is just a constant reminder of those three things that help me.
Well, what I see in that is, for one, you're taking a pause and you're asking questions instead of reacting. That's an emotional intelligence, right?
Right.
And then you recognize you do have emotions. What are they?
I don't know. See, and that's been the fun thing I've been working on the last few months since we went through your emotional intelligence classes. All right. Because a lot of people think that having emotional intelligence means that you don't have any emotions, you just block them out. But the fun part is when you say, okay, I'm feeling anger. Well, why am I feeling anger? Or I'm feeling sadness, or whatever it is. And you explore that emotion for a few minutes to see, what is this trying to tell me about myself? That is fun.
It's an indicator light, really.
Right.
I think of an emotion as an indicator or a signpost that, pay attention. You're bored. Maybe you need to do something besides distract yourself. Be creative,
Right.
Or maybe you're lonely. Maybe you need to connect with someone.
Right.
Maybe you're jealous and you're worried about your relationship. So maybe you need to focus on that relationship a little bit.
I read a book a little while ago, since you brought up relationships, and it said all problems are interpersonal relationship problems.
I read that book.
Yeah, it's a good book. Remind me of the title, because it left me right now.
No, I just remember the quote, all problems are relationship problems. Are you sick of the way things are going in your life? Are you going through some life quakes or some transitions that you could use some support through? Do you feel stuck, bored, stressed, overwhelmed? Could you use a pause to connect to your heart, mind, spirit, and self? We know that feeling. We've been there before. And that's why we're offering a solution that we know has worked for us. It's a chance for you to pause and to reflect and to grow and to transition well. It's not something you do alone. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's a willingness to do things that are so important that they're worth doing, even and especially when you're feeling that fear. This Women's Lotus Retreat features a chance to be surrounded by people who are as motivated and as connected as you seek to be. You can expect to gain new skills, shift old mindsets, old habits, and ways of being that make you feel stuck. If you're looking for CEUs and a reason to ask for time off from work for professional development, this is an amazing opportunity awaiting you. Your investment and emotional enrollment in the process of development opens the doors for you to change and for change to happen in your life. It isn't easy, but it's simple. So my question to you is, will you enroll or walk away from this opportunity? And if not now, when? Treat yourself and register today with the link in the bio. We hope to see you there this September in beautiful Teton Valley, Idaho.
Yeah. So even in my job as a county commissioner, I start looking at that. And when we have issues at the county, I go back and go, all right, what's the problem? Okay, take the problem away, look at the individual and see, all right, what is the issue that they have with either the relationship with someone else, the relationship with me? Are we not communicating correctly? Where is our relationship not aligned? And as I've started to work on that, it has changed things dramatically.
That's such a skill. Alignment conversations are so important as a leader
Mm-hmm.
to be able to see where other people are, to able to gain other perspectives. What do you think now that you have been able to zoom out? Because I feel like where you are now, you can zoom out and see things as they are versus your only one reality when you live in or zoomed in
Mm-hmm.
macro level, right? So, if you're able to zoom out and see all of these different perspectives, how much more impactful do you think that you are as a leader for your team, for your county, for the people you coach, the people that live in your world? Like, how much more impactful do you think you are um, by being able to zoom out and really get out of the ego and get into the soul level and also into there's a lot of different ways to look like this. The world isn't all black and white.
No, and my relationships are so much better because of that, and they're so much deeper. When that project I was talking about died, what we thought was the final death, I had two or three people reach out to me who really weren't even on the team per se, but because of the relationships we developed, they reached out to me and gave me small little gifts saying, "Hey, we appreciate watching what you're
Mhm.
doing and how you're handling this, and just want you to know we're proud of you."
That's
And
awesome.
I'm like, "Wow, thank you. That
Mhm.
that means a lot."
Yeah. That's vulnerability, isn't it? Like,
Yeah.
right? Like sharing your feelings, your the ways you'd like to see things go, but also not being attached to the outcome. You can still fight for something and want something,
Hmm.
but then when it doesn't happen, you let it go
Right.
and
Right.
surrender to life as it is, not how you wish it would be.
Right. And that's where an individual's true power comes from, is letting go of the ego,
Mm,
not being attached to not attaching my identity to standing on top of that mountain, whatever that mountain is.
mhm,
Um, I was talking with another client a couple weeks ago about they were going after promotion. I go, why do you want that promotion? Well, I want this and I want this and I want that. And I said, do you really think you're going to find that? And, the happiness that you're searching for? And they went, well, I think so. And I was like, well, why do you climb the mountain?
mhm.
Why do you go to the gym and lift weights? Why do you do that? Well, I don't know. And it took them a while. And finally they just got back to because I want to make me better.
Mhm,
That's why we climb the mountains, because I want to make me better.
mhm,
Because if I'm better, then I can help you be better.
mhm.
And by helping you get better, I get better. So the cycle feeds
Yeah,
itself.
just like us, like being willing to be vulnerable with each other about things that we were working through or still are on occasion. We'll give each other a call and go, "Can I get that perspective that I
Mhm.
need?" that non-emotional perspective because we're not in the weeds. We're out. And I feel like that's one of the best gifts that a friend can give to another person, or even in a intimate relationship, in any relationship, a work relationship, just being in a space where you can say, I'm not exactly sure how to handle this. This is how I'm feeling. Um, this is why. And then you actually talk it out. Those feelings start to subside. You feel heard, you feel seen, and then you can, after you're back down to like a flow state, you're kind of in a green space, like you're not hot, red hot, you're green again, and you're just like at a relaxed flow state. That's when the better decision making happens, and you can show up as your best self.
You know, a key to that that I have found and have been working on for the last 2 years
Mm,
actually is learning to listen without myself. So when I'm with a client or a friend and they say, "Hey, can you help me with this?" I have to really think hard and say, "Okay, I'm going to listen without myself." And what that means is I'm not going to try to pin any of my experience. I'm not going to try to pin any of my thoughts on the things that you tell me. I'm just going to listen as a blank slate. And once I have learned to do that, that changed my listening game because then I start paying attention to the words you use. And you've
mhm,
used this phrase before, and I love it that the words are the wardrobe of the soul.
mhm,
Once you start listening to the words that people use and you can dive into that, that helps solve their problems so much more than saying, well, I had the similar experience and this is what I did. No, it's, hey, that's an interesting word. Why'd you use that word?
mhm,
Well, I use that because of this. Well, why is that important to you?
mhm.
And and that's the thing I hate about recipes. You have all these, do these 5 things and you'll be a millionaire or whatever.
Right.
Recipes are crap
Yep.
because, the stuff in your cupboards isn't the same stuff in my cupboards.
Yeah.
Your oven,
Context matters.
yeah,
Altitude matters.
your oven cooks hotter than mine. I don't know. But
Yeah.
if I can just give you some space to talk in a judgment-free zone
Mhm,
and not bring any of my false narratives to how I think you should operate, there is such power in that because it gives you a space to think and to listen to what that little voice inside of you is saying,
mhm.
hey, do this. And as you said, get there without that emotional attachment and then move forward.
That is huge. And I would have to say that is a habit that I've been working to break too, because I like to connect. And so I like to empathize with people and be like, oh, I feel that. Like I can see where you would be, that pain, especially if it's somebody that has dealt with loss or a divorce or something that I've went through. It's hard for me to not loop that back because I want to connect with them, but it isn't often serving them well. When if I come in with any, if I don't just create space and let them, um,
But the greater connection comes when you meet them in that neutral space
mhm,
where I'm not bringing my baggage to the table because I don't understand your pain. You don't understand mine. And if
mhm,
you're coming to me with a problem, you don't really care about my pain.
mhm,
So it's, man, that sucks. That loss has got to be hard. And I
mhm,
acknowledge your pain. That opens up a whole new space for you and me to meet in.
mhm,
And it is such a powerful space. That space beyond me is
mhm.
powerful.
Absolutely. And that's a skill that all of us can work to get better at is, and I hope that's a gem in this podcast that you can take away is that just working on creating that space to tell somebody, yes, I hear you, I see you, and that sucks.
Yeah. Acknowledge the pain. That sucks. You're right.
Not, well, when my dog died, or when my dad, when you say your dog died, and they say, well, I had to do this, blah blah blah, or my dad died, and then oh well, when my dad died, and it turns into your story, even though you think you're connected, you just disconnected
Mhm.
from that person and shut them down.
Yeah, because you're bringing you back into the conversation, and that's part of that whole learning to listen without yourself.
Yeah. And it's a practice. I don't think that like you just nail it on the head the first time you try it because you get in habits and ways of being that, served you for a certain amount of time, but it doesn't mean that it's going to serve you in this next phase of your life.
Right. And it's easy. It's easy to say, oh, yeah, I had the same thing.
Yeah.
It's just an easy thing to do rather than sit there and say, nope, I'm just going to be a blank slate
Hmm.
right on the wall.
Yeah. And that is serious skill. I love that. And I think that the more we can create those kinds of spaces for people and listeners, they won't feel as lonely and as isolated, and they can just work through their own stuff. Really, people do have their own answers.
They do.
They don't need everybody to make their decisions for them.
No, no, because people outside of that particular thing don't understand all of the variables that that person is seeing and dealing with.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah. So, are you open to sharing any kind of um, constraints that you feel like you had to actually get rid of so that you could see more clearly, or how have you like dropped some of your old mindsets?
it is a process. It has been a process, and it starts when I was younger. I used to keep thinking that there was a magic bullet that I would have one experience and it would just change me forever. But what I've found is it's just a bunch of small experiences along the way, being attuned or paying attention to how I'm feeling here. And I ask my clients when I work with them, I said, how do you know when you found truth?
Hmm.
And universally, people will say, well, I feel it right here. Okay, great.
Hmm.
So I pay attention to how I feel here. So when I feel that, I go. So the changes that I have made have come very small, very incrementally over the last 2 years. It's been quite a journey. And I can think of 4 or 5 moments, like I told you, the treadmill,
Hmm.
that was one of those moments.
Hmm.
It was like, "Oh, wow." And, a few weeks ago, I had another moment where I was working with a coach on me specifically on
Hmm.
some things, and they called me out on some stuff and read me the riot act.
Hmm.
But there was a huge mental shift that occurred because of that. That's like, okay, had I not done all the things prior to that to get me to that point, I wouldn't have been open and receptive to that gift. And it
Right.
was a gift,
Yeah.
very painful gift,
They are,
but
aren't
it
they?
was a gift that has now had an impact on me that I can't wait to see where it takes me.
Yeah. That's amazing because you're right. It's not going to be in a book. You might read one book right now, and one thing you could read it 10 times and it won't hit you until the timing is right.
Yeah. When the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
That's right. Absolutely. And that's one of the frustrating things about life is when you have worked through some of those things and you want to help other people, but they're not ready. Can you share to that?
Yeah. And I want to talk about two things before I do
Yeah.
that. People think that once you have that mindset shift that you're done with that, but it's not. You'll continue to refine that as you go. That's like I said, living on the other side of change. Well, I've changed. Now, what does that look like? And there will be continual refinements to that process. Now, when people come and say, hey, can you help me do this? That's a little different thing. And I remember, I think I sent you the book Chop Wood, Carry Water.
Mhm. Very good.
And one of the very last things that they talk about in that is don't go where you're not invited,
Hmm.
which basically says don't take your information that you have and push it to other people unless they come and specifically say, can you help?
Hmm.
And then the answer is absolutely. I would love to help. What do you want? What do you need? And then again, going into that relationship or that conversation without any expectations on my part, because a lot of people will come in and say, and you see people go into the gym all the time and they go for years and years and you think, man, they're not changing. They're not doing anything. Okay, but they're at their gym, so they're doing something.
Hmm.
So I've been working on just being that blank slate. Okay, if you want help, you come to me. I'm not going to come to you.
Hmm.
And I'm not going to put expectations on you. I'll hold you accountable,
Hmm.
but it's up to you. Here we go. Are
Absolutely.
you ready to go down that rabbit hole? Because
Hmm.
it's going to be painful.
Hmm.
The world is going to shift. And if you're ready, we'll go. And if not, that's fine.
Absolutely. I One of my mentors last week, he put a post out on LinkedIn. Ron Price has been on the podcast, and he put a post out about as a coach, and coaching many executives over the years, that he can only be responsible for 10% of his client's success. That his clients are ultimately responsible for their success. You can help them with their goals. You can help them with, setting things up, seeing things different ways. But ultimately, they're the ones responsible. But oftentimes, you'll find if people don't, you can work with three different clients, and give them the same advice, same information, and there'll be 3 different responses. There'll be the person who doesn't do the work and makes excuses and doesn't do the work you actually ask them to do. There'll be the second person who will come and they'll kind of half-ass it and do it mediocre. And then there's going to be the person who goes in and treats it like this is their life, like it's meaningful, and they're gonna have read the book, read the chapters, they wrote about it, they really went in and dove in. That third person is gonna be the one who actually sees the most growth, and that's where you get that 100%, like you're doing the work, the coach gave you the roadmap, and you achieved it. Have you seen that in coaching people?
Yeah. And the further I get into coaching people, the more I start the conversation with, why are you doing this?
Mhm.
Why do you want this? What is it? What pain are you running from?
Mhm.
And if you're willing to be upfront about that, then we're going to get somewhere. But if you're not willing to be upfront about the pain you're running from, then we're not going to get anywhere. And okay, we'll do the dance a little bit.
Mhm.
When I see that you're not going to be willing to be accountable or to have those hard conversations, then we'll be done. But
Mhm.
to me, I go back to Simon Sinek's book, Start with Why.
Mhm.
That is such a true principle of, why do you want to do this? Why
Mhm.
does it matter to you? Because the little decisions that you make in the dark when no one else can see will have the greatest impact when the lights are on and everybody can see you.
Mhm.
And unless you have the right why behind you, you're not going to make those little decisions in the dark that will take you where you want to go.
That's so good. Absolutely. I love that. That's a quote from Jeff Hough.
Wow. Mic drop, walk away on that one. Holy cow.
I love that. That's really good. Um, let's just talk about the 3 things you wish you'd have known as a younger Jeff, like what you wish you might have known now from the wisdom that you've gleaned and looking at yourself and looking back.
Probably the first thing that I can think of that comes to mind is relationships matter. And the surface level, that sounds pretty easy, but it's really the depth of the relationship matters,
Mhm.
and trying to learn to connect on that. That's the most important thing than anything, is that matters. The second thing would be not to take yourself and life so serious,
Mhm.
because there are so many things outside of your control that you're really just on the roller coaster ride. So
Mhm.
hang on.
Mhm.
And then number three, I would go back to just that my statement of, nothing has meaning unless you give it meaning. So learn how to assign meaning appropriately.
Yes, absolutely. Those are great tips. I wish I'd have known those earlier too.
Yeah. But, like you said, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And when I was ready to listen to stuff like that, it happened.
Absolutely. You have to be willing. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink.
So true.
You can lead a person to knowledge, but you can't make him think.
True. True.
Yeah. So, mic drop on that.
That's a quote from Angie right there.
Well, thank you for being on the Leader You podcast. We're going to follow this up with this part 2, where we're going to go into um, a little bit more about what's next for you.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me back.
Yeah, absolutely.